Welcome back to the channel, guys. I'm Recommend, and today we're going to be talking about Arcade1UP. Recently, they released a few cabinets that are miniature size, supposedly 3/4 scale size miniatures of original machines. And one of them really caught my attention, which was the Street Fighter 2 cabinet, because I grew up in an era where Street Fighter 2 was the rage in the arcade. And what kid didn't want to own an arcade cabinet, especially for my day, a Street Fighter 2 cabinet? So, looking at the prices, originally there was retailing or supposed to retail for $400, but Walmart and GameStop in particular had really been selling them for $299, and even some of the other sites are going for $349, so nobody's really going for the $400 price, which I don't think it's ever going to stick at this point. Generally, they're going to go for about $300. For Black Friday, you were able to get them at Walmart and GameStop in particular for $250, which was when we bit and got our unit here. It was paid for by us. You know, my fiance paid for it as a birthday gift for me, which was awesome. I was like, all right, you know, I know that there are a couple of issues with it, and I know that, you know, it's a toy. I'm not expecting it to be an exact replica of the arcade, even if it is supposed to be smaller. So I kept that in mind, that, you know, you're not going to get things like a CRT or anything like that. The wood is not going to be as high quality, and, you know, it's not going to be as big. Now, they do sell a riser that makes the machine about just over 5 feet tall. I believe it's just like 5 1/4, something like that, which makes it so it's tall enough so you can stand up and play your game standing up. It's supposed to bring the joystick panel to the same height as a real arcade machine, and testing that out, that was true. But before I get into any of the negatives and why I returned my personal unit, I'm gonna go ahead and say what I did like about it. In terms of the emulation quality, it played fine. I didn't feel any particular lag. It was very responsive. I didn't feel like there was a problem between myself and the controls when it came to the actual reaction time, which was great. You know, I enjoyed playing the game. You know, all 3 versions were great. You know, Champion Edition, Super Street Fighter, and Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo were all very responsive in terms of reaction. I didn't feel any crazy amounts of lag, even though these machines are not, you know, they're not jamming machines or anything. They're all emulation based. Now, with that said, well, you know what? The artwork on the machines was pretty nice too. It's made to replicate the original Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition machine. Again, something I grew up with. I grew up in New York City, where there were literally every corner had a Street Fighter machine. Like, you could literally walk from store to store, and every store was trying to get in on the action. So there was a lot of Street Fighter to play in New York. So I'm pretty familiar with the machines. You know, even though it's been a while, you know, my memory's not as fresh, but it's fresh enough where if something is really, really wrong, chances are I will remember. You know, for example, the ball tops. You know, the genuine Champion Edition machines had bat style tops. They didn't have ball tops like these machines. But again, like I said earlier, I don't expect them to be exact replicas for the price that you're paying for these. But now, with that said, you got the artwork and you got the general responsiveness in terms of lag. That's pretty good. So they seem very low lag, or at least very playable in my opinion. I wasn't gonna go and sit there and measure lag, because honestly, what I'm gonna get into in a few minutes or in a few seconds explains why I didn't get that deep into it. But you got the artwork and you got the way it feels in terms of lag. It feels good. You know, you have to work that hard to measure the lag anyway, then chances are it's pretty low to begin with, unless it's really annoying you. Now, let's get into some of the issues. I watched a whole lot of big YouTubers or bigger channels than mine. You know, a lot of them got their machines for free. Some claim to have paid for them. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. Who knows? But most of them are generally giving this machine, or these machines, fairly positive reviews. I mean, they'll put in a problem or two that they'll name, and like, but they won't name anything like really big. But there are some pretty big issues with these, well, at least a Street Fighter 2 cabinet that I got. So let's start with the most obvious one. I don't know if people are just blind or willfully ignoring or just spent 2 minutes on the machine before reviewing it, but when you play any of the 3 versions of Street Fighter, there's a shimmering effect going on, which means the emulation is poor. They're not scaling it correctly. So the biggest giveaway, at least when I first played, was I was playing Champion Edition, and I was fighting against Dalsim, and the elephants, every time I moved around the elephants, particularly when I was jumping back and forth or anything like that, I noticed there were like horizontal lines on the elephants, like they weren't being drawn correctly. And once I noticed that, it's like I couldn't unsee it, and then everything else started becoming even more clear. So sometimes you will see artifacts, not just when you were jumping up and down, but even when you were moving, and sometimes the characters themselves would exhibit artifacts, which is just poor emulation. That's a huge no-no, when first of all you're only putting in 3 versions of the same game on one arcade machine, and you're charging $300 for this, and I can understand why they charge. They have to, you have the materials, which for the most part it's like cheap particle board, and you got your LCD screen and your controls. But the licensing of the artwork is another thing, which I understand there's a cost to it. But there's 3 versions of the same Street Fighter. It's not even like it's Street Fighter 2, Street Fighter Alpha 2, and like Street Fighter 3 or anything like that. Like 3 completely different versions of Street Fighter with different artwork. Like it's 3 versions of Street Fighter 2, which is technically the DLC of back in the days. It started with Street Fighter 2 and they just kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. It's like it's DLC for back then, except you have to pay for it. It was physical DLC. But just the way that they set that up, and the way I don't know how they got past testing. All this shimmering is ridiculous, and how any other reviewers missed it, I don't get it. Honestly, I don't understand how they could possibly miss that, unless it was, like I said, just willfully ignoring it because they got a free machine or never played the game in the arcade or something. But even if you don't play it in the arcade, something's wrong. It happens in all 3 games, and you can play around. I have it on the screen here and there. You're gonna see it. I'll slow it down. It's hard to capture on camera, but in person you can see it pretty clearly. That's a big problem. This whole thing with the shimmering and the artifacts for the graphics, that shouldn't happen on something like this. This product should have been fine-tuned to perfection, to the point that other than the fact that it was a CRT, you shouldn't be able to tell that you're not playing the original ROM. It just makes no sense to me how that was missed. Now, in addition to that, you have the other crazy emulation issue where on 2 of the games, you're missing the left sound channel, which I don't know how that got past testing. Really, like, did no one that plays Street Fighter or even played a video game even test these things? It makes no sense to me. In Champion Edition, the problem is fine. It seems to deal well with the mono speaker. It's Street Fighter is a stereo. It's actually a Q sound game, which Capcom touted as this amazing feat of audio engineering back in the days, and it sounded great for its time. I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed it quite a bit. But to have the left channel missing, for example, when you're playing Street Fighter, Super Street Fighter or Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which is really noticeable. If you start the game and with 2 players, move the right second player around, to choose a character, and you'll hear the noise every time the little square moves across the character's face, and you'll see that it makes a noise. However, on the left side, you won't hear anything because the channel is missing. This should have been easily fixable through the emulator that they're using. They could have moved it to mono sound or find a way to emulate as fake stereo or something where both channels when they came through. Like I said, it seemed to work fine in Champion Edition. So the fact that they push us out the door with that glaring issue, it's a problem, and it really got on my nerves. It was paired with the actual, with the actual shimmering issue. So you had shimmering artifacts and bad sound. That's not a good look already. That's bad. Like I said, for something that's a $300 machine, and they wanted $4. I can understand the profit margin, but this is ridiculous. On top of that, on my machine, now this is my personal machine. This may not happen to other people, but from what I've been seeing online, it seems to be a problem with a good amount of people. Anyway, so on mine, the screen itself, it comes with an LCD screen, because a CRT like this behind me just wouldn't be feasible for that kind of a machine. It would bring up the weight. They don't really make them anymore anyway. It just wouldn't work out. The machine, the LCD screen, had pretty bad light bleed, which for cheap LCD, it's somewhat expected, but just to see that much of it, it's a little disappointing. But it gets worse. There was dust under my screen, or in my screen, the LCD screen itself, not the plexiglass cover or the transparent cover that goes over it. The LCD screen had light bleeding. The contrast was pretty washed out in anything that was dark. Again, that's normal for cheap LCD screens, but it also had dead pixels. So I had a couple of dead pixels, and then finally was the dust under the screen, which is unforgivable. That's horrible. Like, how did that make it out the factory? Then, along with those issues, the plexiglass cover that was covering it to protect the screen, that had scratches from the factory as well. Like mine had like a footprint thing on it, on the plastic itself. They put like a saran wrap, plastic on top of everything to protect it out of the box. So I figured it was on that. So when I took it off and I'm like, it's still on the actual unit, that was kind of crazy. So I took it apart and I started cleaning it up, and it wasn't coming off. So it was actually from the factory with scratches and like weird marks that I couldn't remove. Then of course I tried to clean the LCD screen, like I said, dead pixels and all that stuff. Dead pixels, backlight bleed, dust under the screen of the panel, the actual LCD panel, all came from the factory like that, which is terrible. So overall, I was pretty disappointed. The machine being a little small, you should be knowing what you're buying before you get into it. The stereo issue, it's bad. It requires a hardware fix, and from what I've read, Arcade1UP is not planning to fix that anytime soon. They're not replacing the board or anything like that. It's not upgradable. It's not hardware upgradable. It's not software upgradable. Like, for a user, you can't. As a user, you can't. Update anything yourself. It's unfixable for the most part, unless you're willing to do a hardware mod. Which for a $400 toy, or even from $250 and up, you shouldn't have to do. It's not a good look. In terms of the build quality itself, it felt okay. I mean, there were some cheap parts, but you have to remember what you're paying for in terms of the machine. I did put I didn't buy the riser because nobody had it in stock at the time, but it's about a foot high. It's about a foot high riser, which put at the bottom of the machine, it does bring it up enough so you can stand up and play. These were designed for some reason to be sit-down machines. I've never been personally to an arcade where you're supposed to sit down at every machine and play, especially in fighting games. It was always stand-up. But okay, maybe they went to an arcade somewhere else where everybody was sitting down. I'm personally a person that likes to stand up while I play. So I did have a box that was exactly the same height as the riser. I measured it, and I put the arcade machine on top. And, I was able to play. The controls literally were about the same height as a real arcade machine, which was cool. I had no problem with that part. However, it doesn't help that the screen is still pretty low, even though the controls are extra high. So what ends up happening is that your head and your neck are at a kind of an awkward angle if you're going to play for a long time, and you're going to have neck pain in the back of your head because you're at an awkward angle looking down while you're playing your game, which is not good. I mean, I don't know what everybody has different, health issues or states of health. It may not be good for you. Now, I'm not a super tall guy. I'm 5'7". If you're taller than me, you're really gonna suffer. My fiance, it's like 5'2". She's short. It was a good height for her, but even her, like I noticed she had to tilt her head down a little bit, not anywhere near as much as me. But if you're a kid that just, maybe like 13 and you're not a particularly tall kid, then maybe you might get away with it. But for a grown adult, anywhere over 5'2" or 5'3", you may experience some neck pain after playing for a while. Even with the riser. Without the riser, even when you look at their own advertising, you see the guys are like leaning over and their necks are really, like at a funny angle. So just keep that in mind. It may be painful for you to play for a long time if that's what you want to do. So overall, I wanted to be a lot happier than I was with the machine. I had it for 3 days in my house. It wasn't very hard to put together. It took us maybe, half an hour. We built a lot of IKEA furniture in the past. In terms of the quality, the actual parts, they were okay for the price that you were paying. As long as you were paying $250. For $400, unacceptable. For $250, okay. But the quality control is not there. You got hardware issues. You got software issues. You got possible medical issues if if you're a tall person. So overall, I still don't get how many of these other YouTubers missed all these issues. Like I said, some of the hardware issues maybe they wouldn't have because every machine is in an individual machine. Actually, something else I want to bring up: the controls themselves. The buttons felt fine. For example, I didn't really have a problem with the buttons. They obviously don't feel as high quality as an actual arcade machine, which is again something that's to be expected for what you're buying. It's supposed to be like a toy, basically a high-end toy. But the stick itself, it's a Street Fighter machine stick. It was a square gate, so it only had like 4 directions really, even though you could obviously play with 8. But it made doing dragon punches challenging. It was responsive and pressing back and forth. Your character will move up, back and forth and up and down. But doing dragon punches was annoying. Even if you look at videos of other reviewers, quote unquote, reviewing the machine, you'll see that while they're saying the controls are good, they're struggling to get moves out. Watch the videos. I'm not gonna name names, but watch the videos of everybody who's reviewing it and talk about how great the controls are and the joysticks are. But look at how they're playing. Don't listen to what they're saying. Look at how they're playing. If you're a Street Fighter player, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You'll know when they're missing moves just by looking at it. So just keep that in mind. The controls will be fine for something like, say, Strider or Ghosts and Goblins, which is actually on an upcoming machine that's supposed to come out next year. But for Street Fighter, they really should have used something more high quality, especially since you're bundling 3 versions of one game in there. Honestly, they should have just made it a little bit of pricier. Use if they needed to get the high quality parts in there, stereo speakers, better quality joystick. And honestly, I don't, even with the artwork and the licensing, I don't get why there's only 3 versions of one Street Fighter. If you look at other stuff from, like, if I remember correctly, Retrobit, you look at some of the like the arcade classics, like the little mini machines that they put out, they have a ton of games from different companies, licensed ROMs as well, some of the artwork, and they have way more games on one machine. Like if Retrobit were to take one of their, one of their retro machines right now with all those arcade ROMs and everything, and just toss it into a cab that was, to say better quality than the 1UP, it will blow them away out of the gate. So I don't understand why they're trickling out these games. But that's a different rant for a different day. Just kind of wanted to get into that. But overall, in my opinion, and hopefully it'll help some of you guys out there. I think it seems like I'm one of the few people who's actually giving a true, honest opinion from a real consumer's point of view. Unless you're an extremely casual Street Fighter player, or just don't care, about certain things, then I would say wait till these machines have their kinks worked out and go down in price. Which I suspect after the holidays they should be getting real cheap and go on sale real soon. When I went to Walmart to return the machine today, there were literally like pallets of these things just sitting there and nobody was grabbing them. You know, and they had a Pac-Man machine sitting there, and the Pac-Man machine, you know, had the paint peeling off and everything. And Pac-Man has only been out what, a week, technically like a week. You know, supposed to be like that big Black Friday thing. So overall, I can't recommend it to anyone for the price because there are too many issues for what you're paying for. You know, in addition to except to the hardware and the software issues that I mentioned, you know, with things like dust on the screen and scratches and software shimmering and sound missing. You also have the other issues that I didn't experience because I had the machine long enough, which the paint will come off, so you have to call the company. And that's actually one last thing I need to mention before I go. These machines only have a 90-day warranty, so that's 3 months. And I did try to call them. So before anybody says, Ray, well, you should have called them and had them fix your issue. No, I called them. Problem was, I called them on a Saturday. So they're closed on Saturdays. They're closed on weekends. So you're taking 90 days, for 3 months. You're removing weekends. So you technically have about 66 days of warranty to get your stuff fixed. Once that happens, you're out of luck. You know, you might be out of your return period from, you know, GameStop or Walmart or wherever you bought it from. So do the smart thing. If you're having issues with your machine and they're going to try to do their hardest to prevent you from returning it, return that machine. Keep your box, put your machine together, try to have fun with it. But if you have an issue, put it right back in the box and take it right back to wherever you bought it from. If you have to exchange it, exchange it. If you have to take your money back and then wait for a better, machine to come out, then do that. Do not sit there and call them and try to get them to replace parts. Some people, if you look online on forums, it doesn't take much of a Google search to figure this out. But keep in mind that some people are getting the stuff with 6 weeks after they called. 6 weeks. That's way past the return period for a lot of people. Don't put yourself in that spot. Don't give a company the power to put you in a bad place with your money that you worked hard for. Keep that in mind. But just return the machine. You can call them and try them out. And if they can get stuff shipped to you before your return period is over, then great. But the minute you see that it's taking too long or that they give you a ridiculous amount of shipping time, then return that machine. Don't put yourself in a bad spot for any company. You don't owe any company a loyalty. So, again, I'm not recommending it. Only buy this if you're a tinkerer or someone who really likes to take stuff apart. For example, if you're trying to Raspberry Pi it or put other emulators into it, great. You know what to do, but you're going to spend more money to the point where it might not make sense to buy this machine for what it is, because now you're modding it and spending so much more money and putting way too much money into what it's supposed to be for. Just generally stay away from it. Again, this is recommend. I hope you enjoyed my review. There's a lot of reviews like this on my channel. Generally, they're a lot more, let's just say, edited than this one is. But if you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe, give me that thumbs up, and I will see you next time.